hotel data breach affects over 10 million users. A voting app may allow hackers to change a vote. Your photo app may be sharing data that you didn't expect. Another big WordPress vulnerability. And are automated license plate readers sharing data about you when you're driving that they shouldn't? All this on This Week in Cybersecurity with the Code Curmudgeon. MGM Resorts had a big data breach, over 10 million users' data. And, this is one of those sort of regular things, if you're a regular watcher or reader of my blog, that people leak big, giant amounts of data. Now, MGM has apparently caught this and, in theory, rectified it. There's not a lot of data out yet. This story's been really big just because of the size, but we don't really know what happened. But they claim that they've caught it. And the funny thing is that their statement about it was that it was a quote-unquote limited number of users. So, okay, 10 million is less than the 100 plus million that Marriott got zapped with a year or two ago. But for most of us, 10 million isn't really a limited number. So one of those things, if you're visiting hotels, casinos, etc., maybe even grocery stores and such, but people who have your private personal data, your phone number, your email address, your date of birth, etc., be aware of who you're giving data to and what kind of data, because even though they're going to tell you they're going to keep it safe, at some point maybe it's going to get breached. There was another funny thing about this on LinkedIn. There was a comment when I was commenting on this story, and someone said, hey, it's even worse because this is a casino, and so people really don't want the data known. And my response is that casino data is no more important to the users or the victims than hotel data or any other data. I don't think it's a bigger deal that this included casinos. I think it's just a big deal that someone who took your private data and chose to store it didn't do a good job of taking care of it. So there we go, another week, another data breach. What else have we got on our list? Voting apps. Okay, there's this voting app called Voatz, V-O-A-T-Z, and it was actually used in the 2018 midterm elections in Virginia, maybe other places as well, but that's what I've seen. But MIT did an in-depth study trying to figure out, can this thing be breached? Because that's the big question we have now. Digital voting, online voting, app-based voting, can it be secure? Because it would certainly probably increase participation, which in theory should be a good thing. But for those of us involved in software community, and especially in cybersecurity, it's just really scary. So yeah, as it turns out, MIT found out that this is indeed really scary, that there are lots of ways to break into this thing. The people who made the app aren't being really forthcoming on what they've actually done. They're giving nice little platitudes about, hey, we use blockchain, we use biometrics, we've done a bunch of stuff to secure it. But again, when MIT studied it, it turns out that if you have root access to the device that the app is running on, that you can bypass all the host-based security mechanisms. So in other words, I could figure out your PIN for voting, I could maybe change your vote, and do other things like that. Also, they're not apparently encrypting all of the data that they should be when they're storing it, and there may well be a vulnerability in their blockchain that they're using. So, a mess. Once again, a couple weeks in a row, a mess in voting-related and democracy-related applications. So, for whatever that's worth, photo data. There is a photo app called PhotoSquared. And I don't use it. I don't know what it really does. But it turns out this was another case, and I didn't pick on this because it's a photo thing, even though, yeah, I do take photos. I picked on this because it's another one of my weekly cases of there was an S3 database that was unsecure. Simply put, the data was just out there on the internet, no password protection, etc., and people got it. And it contained photos and order information and receipts and things like that. So it looks like as an industry we're still really bad about these data stores, like these S3 data bases and bit buckets that we have. It's kind of scary. Should get better. And this isn't one of those things that a simple, there's a software tool that you can use to detect this. This is really configuration and deployment, and it's why DevSecOps is actually so important. All right, so WordPress, another big WordPress bug. There's a plugin, I don't even remember the name of it. I'll put it down below, don't care. The funny thing about WordPress plugins is they're written by a whole bunch of different people with different skill sets, different capabilities, different experience. And there's so many of them that they frequently end up falling short, especially in the security area. The funny thing is that the really good plugins, in other words, the ones that are cool and people use, end up being used by hundreds of thousands of sites. And in this case, the plugin has a security vulnerability, and apparently over 200,000 WordPress sites have deployed this plugin. It's one of those ones that lets a remote attacker get in and change to root privilege, and so they can basically erase your site. So on one hand, I'd like to pick on the people who wrote the plugin, but the other reason I didn't really want to highlight their name is that this is just a constant problem. And WordPress is awesome, and the fact that you can use plugins is awesome, but just make sure you're staying up to date on it. And if you're going to use plugins that need root access and things like that, just make sure that you're up to date on patches for them, that you're keeping aware of alerts for them, and that probably you need some monitoring against your WordPress server so that if someone does get in and do something, A, you'll know, and B, you can recover from it. So with that, our final story of the week. California's automated license plate readers, ALPR. So these are the things that you see, they're at the top of street lights, intersections, things like that. You see these little cameras, you think that they're really police security cameras, and what they are is license plate readers. So whenever somebody goes past the thing, it records your license plate, and then the government knows you're there. And in theory, they could reach into the database and track you across a large, set of places. So the good part of this is that if they're trying to find somebody, then they can look for the plate number in the database and go, oh yeah, they just passed downtown and let's go get them. Or if they're trying to help establish, whereabouts during a crime, they can say, oh, well, the car went from here to here to here. And recognize that these license plate readers are pretty tight shots, and it's not clear that they can actually see who's in the car. I think they're really more focused on the plate itself. So there is a valid law enforcement purpose for this. The problem is that there doesn't seem to be much in the way of security and privacy guidelines in many of the jurisdictions. The articles out today say that there's about 16 states that do have restrictions around how this data is stored and who can use it, things like that. How long do you keep the data? And who can access it? And can you just share it? Can you just poke at it randomly, phishing? These are all things that need to be resolved. I'm not saying the data can't be used and can't be stored. I'm saying do a good job of it. Keep it private. Make sure that you only give access to the data to people who should have it, like when there's a proper warrant. I know there's a number in one of the articles. I'll put the link down below, but it's a ridiculous amount of records being stored that don't have anything to do with any crime in the local jurisdiction's database. So, this is just data on random people, like your car. We know where you've been today. We know exactly where you've been and how long you stayed there. So should that be something that anybody can get at any time? And plus, data that's stored is vulnerable at some point, because we've just been talking about breaches. This is another one of those funny things. At the end of one of them, there was a comment on the article about the fears, the worries are really overblown. This is a constant thing from a certain group of people saying that, hey, privacy is not a big deal. I don't mind if people know this or that about me. I don't think it's an issue. But the bigger really fear here should be around privacy and identity theft. If people can know more about you, the more pieces of details they get about you, phone number, where you went to school, what your mom's maiden name is, what your favorite color is, the more likely it is that they can break into systems that you care about, whether it's your bank, credit cards, your account at a store, etc. So As a basic rule of thumb, it should be privacy by design. Your data shouldn't be shared. It shouldn't be stored longer than necessary. And data should only be collected for a very specific purpose and only accessible to people who really need access to the data. So that's the 5 stories for this week. Thumbs up if you liked the video. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that bell if you want to get the notifications when the new videos come out. Stay safe out there.